Hello there! This is part 3 of what was originally going to be a 3-part series, but now it's a 4-part series, basically because today's video topic was a lot bigger than I first expected. Speaking of today's video topic, what is it? It's Nightsisters, and it's a lot bigger because the Nightsisters do like their magic. And speaking of Nightsister magic, let's kind of talk about what that is briefly before we get into the applications of it. Nightsisters use an aspect of the Force which they refer to as the magical Ica. They control it and manipulate it using something that they call magic. Now it's very important to note, and if you're going to get one thing from this video, you need to get that magic is spelt CK, because for some reason that's how the Nightsisters spell magic. Another important thing to note, but not quite as important as the spelling of magic, is that Nightsisters will often perform magic in groups, because the magic that they're trying to achieve, the spell that they're trying to cast, requires the input from multiple Nightsisters. There may be one Nightsister almost leading it, which is often Mother Towson, from what we've seen, but lots of Nightsisters assist in the casting of the spell or the performing of the ritual. Now, another thing to note is that the Nightsisters often make use of talismans or potions or other props along that same theme, witch-like props, which we've not really seen previously. So the Nightsisters are very different and use a very different aspect of the Force, and the way they approach that aspect of the Force is very different from the other two groups we've seen. Another thing I will mention before we move on to the uses of Nightsister magic is that the Nightsisters live on Dathomir and very rarely leave. Now the Nightsisters are far more powerful when on Dathomir than when they are off Dathomir, and this is for a couple of reasons. The first one is basically that a lot of the things that they use to use their magic, to cast their magic, is on Dathomir. So the talismans, the cauldrons, the altars that they use to do their spells is all on Dathomir, and so if they're not on Dathomir, they can't use those things. And that's the first reason. The second reason is that Dathomir is very strong in the magical Ica, which is the aspect of the Force, as we've said, that the Nightsisters use. If the Nightsisters or a Nightsister isn't on Dathomir, they have severely diminished power because they don't have as much access to the magical Ica and so can't use as much of its power because it just isn't there. That isn't to say that the Nightsisters aren't powerful if they weren't on Dathomir, it's just to say that the Nightsisters are far more powerful when they are on Dathomir, and therefore some of the uses of Nightsister magic on this list require the user of Nightsister magic to be on Dathomir. Now finally, onto the uses of Nightsister magic. Now unlike the Force itself, the Nightsisters are able to concentrate the magical Ica and utilise it in its purest form, for example as a weapon. And so the Nightsisters are able to shoot the magical Ica in a concentrated beam at their target, just like Sith Lightning. The difference is that Sith Lightning is blue normally, where the magical Ica is a green mist, not lightning. Now, the magical Ica isn't always used in its purest form as a weapon. For example, when Mother Towson is giving Maul some new legs, she uses it to almost melt the metal onto his body, so she's able to concentrate the Ica that she's using so much that it is able to melt metal. The Ica can also be used to taint a kyber crystal, and then the kyber crystal can be used in a lightsaber hilt to, rather than emit a normal lightsaber blade, it emits a green mist, just like the Ica itself. The Nightsisters are able to use their magic to turn the Ica into a shield-like thing, which we see Mother Towson utilise in the Clone Wars, and it is able to block, presumably projectiles, but we only see it block blaster fire. We've kind of covered now all of the uses in canon of the magical Ica itself in a pure form, and so we'll now move on to using it to do other things, just like the Jedi are able to use the Force, or the Sith are able to use the Force. And just like the Jedi or Sith, the Nightsisters are able to use Nightsister magic to do telekinesis, which we've covered extensively within this series now, but I will just give a couple of examples that we haven't talked about yet. Mother Towson is able to fly in one of the episodes, and Merrin during Jedi Fallen Order almost opens the ground up to engulf Malicos after you've beaten him in the fight. The Nightsisters are also able to use Nightsister magic to heal people. We see them use it multiple times throughout the Clone Wars. Some of the time they use what is known as the water of life, which is almost like a potion which they pour around the person that they're trying to heal. But we've also seen Mother Talzin heal Maul during the Clone Wars, and she doesn't use the water of life. So it seems to be that the water of life is not essential to heal someone. Nightsister magic can also be used to possess people in Star Wars. So for example, Count Dooku is possessed by Mother Talzin during the Son of Dathomir comic, and so Count Dooku fights for the Nightsisters temporarily until the spell is broken. In that same kind of theme, Savage Opress isn't necessarily possessed by the Nightsisters because he never unwillingly fights for them, but instead his whole personality changes, and in fact his physique also changes. He becomes taller, he becomes more muscular, he loses any compassion that he once had, and he also becomes more aggressive. The Nightsisters are also able to summon things using Nightsister magic, and are also able to create things out of the magical Ica using Nightsister magic, for example weapons in both cases. They're also able to teleport themselves using magic, and can almost fly around as a mist themselves and move around, so it's almost teleportation, but instead it's almost flying around as a mist, which is a bit strange, but the whole of the Nightsister concept is strange. They're witches in Star Wars. They're also able to make someone go to sleep using magic, so Talzin does this to Savage to put him to sleep. And now we'll move on to the uses of Nightsister magic which utilise additional items in order to achieve the magic. An example of an additional item would be a talisman, for example. First we'll look at potions. The Nightsisters use potions probably quite a lot, but we've only seen them use them a handful of times in canon. So we've already talked about the water of life, so I won't really look at that for now. We've already talked about it. So Asajj Ventress and two of the Nightsisters are able to achieve invisibility, or invisibility to most, as Mother Talzin puts it, during the Clone Wars, when they want to infiltrate Count Dooku's home on Serenno. Now I'd imagine it's invisibility to most, because presumably the other Nightsisters are still able to see the people who have become invisible. Another use for potions is when we see Mother Talzin torture Count Dooku across the galaxy. She makes a cauldron of bubbling green stuff, which is hardly unique within Nightsister magic. She has a talisman or a doll of Count Dooku and a lock of his hair. She submerges the doll or talisman into the potion or the bubbling green stuff, and he is therefore tortured and is in a lot of pain. She is able to project herself through almost his body and talk to him across the galaxy because she has a lock of his hair and uses this potion and doll thing. It's very strange. What I will say is that she actually was able to kill him using this method, but she doesn't because General Grievous gets in the way before he dies. I will just briefly mention before we move on, where does the Nightsister power end? I think it's very important to note that a lot of the very powerful things that they do require additional objects, so like talismans or potions. And in this case, the only reason that Dooku was able to be tortured and was able to be killed by the Nightsisters was because they had a lock of his hair. So, unlike the Jedi or the Sith, which don't seem to use these props particularly, the Nightsisters are very dependent on them to use their most powerful aspects of Nightsister magic. Now onto the category of glowy orb things. Now, glowy orb things are used quite a bit by the Nightsisters and for very different uses. So, the first use we'll talk about is Mother Talzin is able to look across the galaxy to see what Maul and Talzin are doing through the use of a glowy orb thing. This raises the question of, is she able to look at everyone and anyone in the galaxy using this? And I would say probably not. Savage and Maul are both originally Night brothers. Obi-Wan says it himself, the Nightsisters basically are in charge on Dathomir, and therefore I would say she is only able to keep an eye out on other people who originate from Dathomir. The other use of glowy orb things is old Daka when she performs the Chant of Resurrection, and she uses the glowy orb thing, which in this case is known as the Talisman of Resurrection. This allows her to raise the fallen Nightsisters from the dead. They're in their burial pods, and then they come back from the dead and fight as an army of the undead. Now, they're very similar to the zombies that you would think of in our kind of horror genre. They aren't really alive. They don't properly raise Nightsisters back from the dead. They don't have particularly high cognitive function. They basically just know how to attack, and that seems to be it. Now in Jedi Fallen Order you have to fight, or at least run away from, Nightsister zombies, because Merrin has raised them from the dead. Well, she didn't really raise the zombies from the dead. The zombies are a result of her raising dead Nightsisters from the dead. Now, how is she able to do this when she doesn't seemingly use a Talisman of Resurrection? My only explanation to that would be that maybe she has already used it and she just hasn't activated the spell itself. I will also mention one other thing, and that is the Nightsister altar. If you've watched the Clone Wars, you'll be aware that all the Nightsisters end up dead by the end of the Clone Wars. But then if you've watched Star Wars Rebels, there's an episode on Dathomir where Sabine and Kanan are possessed by Nightsister spirits. Now, I will mention this, although I don't think it's a power, I think it's a use of the magical Ica and Nightsister magic. The Nightsisters basically live on through an altar on Dathomir. Now, this is very similar to the transferring of consciousness that we talked about in the last episode with the Sith, but in this case they almost transfer their whole spirit. They're able to possess, and their intention is that they want to almost reform the Nightsisters using new bodies. Now, this doesn't work, and Ezra destroys the altar, so I would assume that that is the ultimate death of the Nightsisters. We also see in the Clone Wars that the Nightsisters seem to be able to take the life force from another being, a bit like Force Drain, which the Sith use, which we discussed in the previous episode. Now, we see this in a Clone Wars arc. Mother Talzin isn't really successful in what she's attempting to do because she's trying to take the life force from Queen Julia. However, she does accidentally end up taking the life force of one of almost the cultists that is following her. So we've seen that with this certain apparatus which uses lenses and this weird circle thing which the person is strapped into, their life force can be taken from their body, and Mother Talzin says that if she had been successful, she would have been more powerful than any Sith or Jedi. The only other thing I will briefly talk about is that the Nightsisters, some of them, after they talk, have this almost deep echo. It's very strange. It doesn't seem to even only happen on Dathomir, and that's really all there is to say about it. I think it's something that innately comes along with the species of the Nightsisters. Now, I will say that the Nightsisters are probably able to do a lot more with Nightsister magic, but we've just not seen it yet in canon. In fact, I would imagine that when they're on Dathomir, given the right equipment, they're probably able to do very, very powerful things. With that said, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments of any uses of Nightsister magic which you'd like to see in canon, or any uses of Nightsister magic which are canon and I've just missed from the list, because I'm sure there's at least one. Or let me know just any uses of Nightsister magic that you like, or anything else you want to let me know within reason, I suppose. You can like the video, it's completely free. Subscribe to the channel, also free, and it would mean a lot. There's a load of other videos that you could watch from the channel, and yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching, bye!